I normally ask, do you regret your addiction? Tracy, you weren't the one who's addicted, but sitting here with me today, everything that we've spoken about, everything that you've told me in your story, do you have regrets? Today's episode brought to you by Gamban, and my guest today didn't lose money gambling, but she lost homes, relationships, and almost her entire life because somebody else did. At what point does a gambling addiction turn into crime? And what happens to the family left behind when it does? This is the side of gambling addiction that not enough people talk about. The partners, the families, and the people living in silence while everything falls apart. This is Tracy's story. Tracy, welcome to the Addicted Recovery Show.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today. I'm going to ask you the question I always ask my guests when I first get them on. If I ask you to think of your most powerful gambling memory, what comes to mind, Tracy?
I think for me, it was when my sister died. My whole life fell apart. It was a very traumatic experience. It wasn't expected. It was a huge shock. And it seemed then, in the time when I was my most vulnerable, that my partner's gambling just completely took over. So to a point where he emptied out my bank account and I couldn't afford to bury my sister.
Wow, sorry to hear about your sister, first of all, Tracy.
Thank you.
How far into sort of the gambling within the relationship, how far into you being aware of the gambling that's going on are we at this point?
About 5 years in. There'd been lots of events leading up to that moment. But for me, I think just because of the pure devastation that event caused me, there was also that realization of I'd spent all this time trying to save him, and I did see it as that, because when you're in a relationship with somebody that's got an addiction, you automatically feel that you go into kind of rescuer mode. How can I help you? I love you. I care about you. I don't want you to be in this pain. I don't want this to be happening to you. I didn't really think about myself a lot during that journey. But it was in that particular event where I realized that I had focused so much of my time on him and wanting him to be okay that actually I should have focused a bit more on her, and I had a lot of resentment towards him for that. And then to add that extra layer of distress and pain was a real low point for me. Yeah, so I'd say we were about 5 or 6 years in. Yeah.
Okay. Let's rewind right back to the very start, and we'll build up to that moment. What was like the first time? How did it all start? Did you have suspicions to begin with? I imagine there was a lot of doubt that you were having, because I imagine if your partner was anything like me, he would have had an excuse or a reason for any suspicious looking activity. Tell me how it all sort of started to unravel.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose my story is a little bit different in the sense that I've always been an impacted other or affected other. So that is somebody that's been, negatively impacted by somebody else's addiction. I grew up in a very Irish household, obviously, with my name. And my dad was quite a heavy drinker. Would I classify him as an alcoholic? Probably, yes. But it wasn't really something that was talked about, and it was very normalized. And I grew up in the 70s where, unfortunately, domestic abusive relationships, men going down, that typical kind of men coming home, money on the table and then off down the pub. And if it resulted in coming home and mum and dad screaming and shouting, that was kind of normal. Well, it certainly was in my household, and it certainly was in my wider family and community. So then I think when I was about, it must have been by the time I was about 13, my older sister by 4 years, there was only just me and my sister, met somebody and started experimenting with drugs, marijuana, things like that. And then by the time I was about 18, I was pretty much my sister's sole carer. My sister became a heroin addict. She pretty much used everything in her lifetime: heroin, crack cocaine, barbiturates, marijuana, alcohol, and her life became very, very chaotic, very chaotic. And my parents were just not equipped to deal with that. They just weren't those sorts of parents that would sit down and have a conversation. We didn't grow up in that type of household where we sat around the table and talked about issues. It was very sort of that she was bringing shame on them, you know, that kind of attitude. She then moved out, which again wasn't the thing to do in our, you know, we were brought up that you got married and you didn't live with somebody before, you know, that kind of attitude. And then at 19, my dad died. My dad was 47, and he died very suddenly of a fatal heart attack in front of me. And my whole life just changed overnight. I remember having to go and find my sister, which I managed to do the next day. You can imagine that I was in a very traumatized state. And I'm laughing because when I met her, I remember when I basically got to the road that she was living in, and then she was coming out of a house, and I thought, oh, she actually looks quite nice. And unbeknown to me, she had just got married. So typical of my sister. So she had been in rehab and she'd met somebody and they left together, and they got married. And so, of course, I've had to say to her, you know, Dad's just died and our lives just completely collapsed. And then her addiction just really spiraled. It just got worse and worse and worse. And then it resulted, her husband then committed serious crimes. He ended up doing quite a long time in prison. My sister was in and out of prison a lot. They had a very small child. And I made a decision to take that child on through the courts. So I had to take both of them to court to get parental responsibility. So I become a kinship carer. I didn't fully adopt her because, out of respect for my sister, I wanted her to always be her mum. It was important that she always had that relationship with her mum and her dad. To be fair, I did maintain both relationships. But after that, my sister's life just become more and more chaotic. So there was always that addiction in my life. There's probably very little that I don't know about substance and alcohol misuse. I've been going to family anonymous groups probably for the best part of my adult life. You know, and I had navigated everything with my sister, from court to mental health. You know, I've had to take part in meetings, you know, where she was sectioned, which was really challenging for me. As I say, taking her to court, and I suppose at the time, although she agreed to me taking on parental responsibility, which in what that meant was that she didn't have parental responsibility over her child, was really challenging. So when she wasn't great, she would say things like, you took my child away from me. How could you do that? I hate you. You're the worst. But, you know, but actually I had to kind of plow through that because I knew that what I was doing was right. I knew that in that space, children, and still are, very weaponized when it comes to, excuse me, women in addiction. I think children are weaponized, and I think children are very much a barrier to recovery for women. So that was it. It was tough. It was really tough, and we would have periods of not seeing each other for quite a while. Her life was obviously going in a very different direction to mine. And then my mum moved back to Ireland, so I was really on my own. And I had children of my own at this point as well. That relationship had broken down because it was incredibly coercive and violent. So here I was kind of on my own with these children, really kind of struggling. Managed to get myself back into work, trying to sort of pull a life together, not kind of really realising all this trauma that was going on for me, I suppose. I mean, I do now because I have a really good therapist, thank God. It's only took me like 30 odd years, but I've got there in the end. And then I went to a school reunion, I think in 2011. And it was there that I met my partner. We'd been to school together, obviously. And we got chatting, and it was really nice to see each other. And he'd sort of shared a bit with me that his marriage had broken down, and he was back living with his parents, and things hadn't been great. And we sort of met up for a coffee a few times after that. And in one of those conversations, he said to me, "I've got a bit of an issue with gambling." And I thought, well, I don't know anything about that. It had never occurred to me in my naivety that gambling could be an addiction, because my experience of addiction was my experience. It was seeing people injecting heroin. It was seeing people smoking crack cocaine. It was understanding that people need support to stop that behaviour, that people become sick if they just stop. So I knew all about that, but gambling, I just thought, what do you mean you've got a problem with gambling? It's like, what's that about? So we started seeing each other. We were seeing each other for, I think, about 6-9 months now. We wasn't living together or anything. We were just going out. There didn't seem to be any problems. He did always seem to have money. He said he was kind of looking for somewhere to live. He was just at his mum's as a sort of stopgap. So I didn't question any of this. Hadn't met his family. I was busy. I was a busy mum. I was busy at work. I just thought, yeah, this is quite nice. I know him. I felt quite safe around him because, like I said, I'd come out of quite a violent relationship previously. So it was all quite nice and comfortable. And then one day he told me, that day we went for coffee? I was like, yeah. He said that I'd had my tag taken off that day. And I remember like, what? And he was like, yeah. I didn't tell you because it hardly would have been appropriate, but like I'd stolen some money from work to fund my gambling. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. And even then, I wasn't thinking, honestly, I just feel like such a fool now looking back on it. I wasn't thinking, this is clearly an issue still. I was thinking, this is something in the past. This is not something that's still in his life, naively. But also now knowing the journeys that I know, I don't know how I thought he had got over it, because I wouldn't have known the first thing about recovery for gambling addiction. So, I was just sort of thinking, oh, that's really, he obviously really trusts me. He's opened up to me. He must be doing all right because he's going to work and money seems to be all right. And we kind of plodded on. And then I think within a year or so, 18 months or whatever, we made a decision to move in together. He moved into my home and we kind of just plodded on. But then I started to notice little things. So, for example, it would get to the end of the month and he had led me to believe, and I totally fell for this, that he's been taken on by his employer, who he used to know before, and because they knew what he had done to his previous employer, they were paying him a really minimum wage. And I believed that in my naivety, and I just thought, well, okay, well, we're kind of plodding on, we're doing okay, we've been doing all right up till now. Obviously, I'm kind of paying the lion's share, I'm keeping my house going, etc., etc. But I started noticing that he was having less and less money. Again, I still can't believe this. The gambling still didn't really hit home for me until I think he came home one day and said, I'm in trouble. I've borrowed some money from work for gambling and I can't pay back and I need you to help me. And I remember saying, what? Like, just completely, what's that about? What do you mean you've borrowed money to gamble? Like, if you haven't got money in your pocket, then surely you'd just stop, wouldn't you? As I say those words, I feel really foolish, but and I get angry when other people say it. When I hear, I've been in situations, especially with my work, where I've heard professionals say to individuals, well, surely you could just stop, and I just think, oh God, that's just awful. So, I think then it was then that I started looking for help for him, thinking, well, okay, he's come to me. And clearly that's the type of person I am. I'm a bit of a fixer. I did it with my sister. And I just thought, yeah, I can deal with this. I can help him. I can put him in the right direction. So I remember sort of going online and finding a local GA and saying, well, maybe you should go to that. That might help. And I remember emailing them and saying, can you send me some information? And they just sent me like the little book, the famous little Gam-Anon book. I'm thinking, oh, okay, is that all there is for me? All right, I'll have a look at that. And of course, it's just kind of like the family equivalent of the 12-step program. So he told me he was going to GA and I thought everything's going to be all right. He's all right. He's going to treatment. I know how this works. I'm a pro at this. He's going to go to meetings and he's going to be all right. He's going to get a sponsor and I'll nip along to the odd meeting to show a bit of support and he'll be fine. How naive. It transpired that, he was just driving up the road, sitting in the car and gambling on his phone, which again, I didn't know you could do. To me, gambling was going into a smoky old bookies with a load of old men. And, I had no idea that you could, it just wasn't in my life. It just wasn't something that had found me. Do you know what I mean? That you could go on your phone and go, and gamble 24 hours a day. It just never occurred to me. It just wasn't something I'd thought about. To me, as I say, with gambling, I associated it with going to the bookies, putting some money on and whatever, like I would if you were going to buy drugs. You would go and meet somebody, buy the drugs, and then... So I didn't have that connection. So things just kind of carried on. And then there would be more and more of those incidents where it would be, I need to borrow money from you because of this, or debt collectors' letters would come around things like logbook loans. Again, I didn't know anything about that sort of thing. It just wasn't in my world. Also during this time, he had kept me really separate from his family. So that was another, looking back on it now, because obviously what was happening, he was going over there and all this was happening over there. He's borrowing large money off his parents. They're bailing him out of things. And unbeknown to me, he would be telling them that it was me that had a problem with money. So he was keeping us very separate, as if like kind of probably saying to his mum, well, don't ring Tracy because she'll be really embarrassed. But it also transpires he was doing that with a lot of my friends and family as well. So he would go to my friends and family and say things like, oh, Tracy's got herself into some debt or whatever and I want to help her out. Don't tell her I've come to you because she'll be really embarrassed. And, so all this was going on behind my back. whilst all the time I'm kind of trying to hold things together. I think another standout moment for you, going back to your original question around what was one of the worst gambling moments, there was another time where my daughter, she had just moved into her own house with her then fiance, now husband, and I had a spare key to their home. And my daughter was off sick one day. She was in her home off sick upstairs in bed, and she heard someone come in. And you can imagine, she's absolutely petrified. She's heard someone come in her house. She knows it's not her husband. I think he was away. And she heard someone like moving around downstairs, opening drawers, whatever. And she just thought, there's a bug, you know, I haven't locked the door. And someone's just chanced the porch was open, chanced the front door, someone's in my house. So she laid, I mean, I can't imagine the fear that she must have had, because, you know, if that person had come upstairs, and unbeknown to her, she doesn't know who it is at the time, obviously. And then she heard the door go and she thought, oh, so she crept out of bed and looked out of the window and she could see that it was my partner. And he had actually gone to their house and stolen money. That was quite horrific. So I remember her phoning me and I just was devastated. I was just absolutely, I felt so ashamed that I had brought this person into my child's life. I just thought, this is just awful. So I said to her, you know, what do you want to do? You've got every right to phone the police. What do you want to do? And she was like, no, Mum, he's not well. You know, he's got, you know, my kids are so, he couldn't have come into a more understanding family around addiction, because I never hid my sister's addiction. You couldn't anyway. So she was very understanding, and she said, no, we need to sit down and talk to him. Clearly that things have got out of control for him if he's reached this level. So that's what we did, and confronted him. And of course, you know, he broke down. I'm in a really bad way. I've reached an all-time low. I can't believe I've done this. I'm really in trouble. I can't help myself. And my answer again was, well, you need to get into treatment. Are you going to your meetings? No, I haven't been going because my gambling's so bad. So I was like, well, you know, you need to, yeah, I promise I'm going to go. I'm going to do it this time. I can't believe I've done this. This is an all-time low. So it was just a case of, you know what, we're with you. We're going to support you. If you're going to go to meetings and stuff, we'll get through this, because that's who we are. That's what, you know, I really care about you. I felt we had started to build a life together. And I wanted him to be well, really. But that was just another smokescreen, really. It just continued, and it just got worse and worse and worse. You know, he was stealing money from me left, right and centre. He was taking out loans. He was using credit cards in my name. He was stealing money. Like, I remember I was at work one day. I used to work in end of life care, and I remember I was at work one day and we wasn't obviously allowed to have our phones on the ward or anything. We used to have to put them in my locker, and I went on my tea break and just checked my phone, and I had about 5 different text messages from the bank saying, these are unusual transactions. Can you confirm that they're you? And I remember I just felt so sick. And I remember phoning the bank, and they were like, you know, it must be you because this person's used the PIN number. And I remember saying, it's not me. I've been at work since 5 o'clock this morning. It's not me. I haven't left here, and I've got the card in my purse. And then going to my purse and realising I didn't have the card in my purse. And I remember in that moment, I wanted to be sick, because the woman on the phone was basically sort of, well, you know, you must have given your PIN number to somebody, so you're not going to be covered by the bank. They're not going to pay this money back. And I mean, literally, I looked at the transactions, and I'd gone from, say, like £1,500, and I could just see this dwindle. It just went, and I just looked at my balance and just thought, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. I'm not going to be able to pay anything for the next month. What am I going to do? And I just remember my legs went to jelly, and I just wanted to be sick. And I was like, okay, well, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Okay, we're going to hand this over to the fraud department, which they did. And I can remember coming home from work really calmly and saying to him, oh, something terrible's happened today. And he said, what? I said, somebody's stolen my card and somehow got my PIN number in it. Now, I knew it was him, obviously, and has emptied out my bank account. We're going to have to do something because we've got no money. And he said, oh, like, how did that happen? Totally turn it around on me. You need to be careful. People can look over your shoulder when you go to the cash point. You know, they've got these devices now that they can put in and they put hidden cameras in and whatever. So I don't know where it come from, but then I suddenly said, well, actually, the bank have said that they've got cameras at all the cash point machines where this person has used, and they're going to send me the footage. And in that moment, he went, it was me. And I said, yeah, I know it was you. It only had to be you. It couldn't be anybody else. He must have looked over my shoulder and watched me put my PIN number in. That's how calculated and focused he was on getting money. And I can just remember flipping out, just, you know, why are you doing this to me? How can you do this to me? You know, it was all about me. I can remember thinking, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Why don't you just go? You clearly don't care about me. You know, I had no understanding of a gambling disorder, gambling addiction at all. I just thought, this is somebody who's greedy, selfish, doesn't give a crap. All they care about is themselves. You know, you clearly didn't think of me in that moment, which obviously he didn't, because he's in active addiction. But I wasn't seeing it the same as still at this point, I wasn't seeing it the same as I would have. I would never have said to my sister, well, you can just stop. What's wrong with you? Just stop. What are you doing that for? I knew that wasn't something that she could do. It wasn't. But I was expecting that from him. So it was another kind of case, well, what am I going to do? Just pick myself up. So now I'm borrowing money. Now I'm seeing my credit score being wrecked. So now any money that I can borrow or cards that I can take out are with a really high credit rate, because I need them to just buy groceries. I need to pay my electricity, and I'm putting these things on high rate credit cards because I've got no money. And being the person that I am, I was never going to go to my friends and family and say, can you help me out? And in some ways, in some ways I wish I had, because then I would have known earlier that he was in fact going to my friends and family, and they would have then, one of them probably would have said to me, is everything all right? Because, you know, he came to us only a few weeks ago, and said, you know, in which case I would have gone, what? No, that's not me. And then it started to really affect my mental health. People could start to see that there was a problem. And I remember I was at work one day and bailiffs came to take my car, and I was so embarrassed. And I needed my car for work because I worked in the community as well as working at a hospice. And I remember saying to my boss, I really need to talk to you. I'm really in a bad way. My partner's got this gambling issue and I don't know what to do. And I'm really, really struggling. And she seemed quite empathetic at the time. Oh, don't worry, you know, we can look at giving you extra shifts and, you know, whatever. But eventually what I saw was I was being managed out. You know, when people would come into our care, we would sort of do, you know, put things in the safe and you know, help with financial stuff and whatever. And I noticed that started to dwindle off, and a lot of responsibilities were taken away from me. I started making a few mistakes at work around medication charts and stuff because I was just exhausted. I was just absolutely just exhausted. And it's not really been until the last 4 years when I look back at this, I realised how really unwell I was. And I will say that I was really very unwell, mentally, emotionally, physically. I started to drink more. yeah, it was almost kind of like, I give up. I gave up. What is it about me? I've come out of this really awful, violent, horrible relationship. And then I've fallen back into another relationship with somebody that really doesn't care about me. They don't care that they're harming me. They don't care that they're harming my family. And I'm just stuck. And people say to me, well, why didn't you just throw him out? And I've thought about that a lot. And I think, I mean, we did split up a few times. He did go back to his parents, but he couldn't stay with his parents because they didn't have the room for him. His parents were elderly. And the alternative was him to be homeless. And my sister spent periods of time homeless, and that really impacted me. And I know this is going to sound like it's all about me, but how I used to see that was, what sort of sister am I that my sister's living on the street? You know, does she not know how much I love her, that she could come to me and say, I'm going on the street? Because she knew that I would say to her, you can't go on the street, you'll have to come live with me. As challenging as that would have been, because she was actively using, she was injecting drugs, she was smoking drugs. I had children in the home, including hers. But I would not have seen my sister on the street. And I couldn't see him on the street either, because now I'm seeing him as this really broken, vulnerable, addicted person. And the more I realise that, my empathy levels heightened for him and the care for myself lowered. And that's something I've learned to recognise. My therapist said to me recently, do you know, and I see an analytical psychotherapist, not a counsellor, so it's like really breaking all that stuff down. And she said to me one day, Tracy, do you realise that you're a masochist? And I thought, gosh, I'm the complete opposite to that. I'm such an empath. I'm such an empathetic person. And she said, no. What I mean by that is you'd rather sit in your own pain than cause pain to others. And that really hit home for me, because there was not a limit of what someone in active addiction could do to me that would make me at that time go, enough, you need to go, I'm not doing this, I can't help you, enough, I'm done. So to me, it was, keep going, Tracy, keep going, you're getting well. Like it was my responsibility. I now know it isn't. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, but I kept going. And we kind of flip-flopped through the next 4-5 years, I suppose, with huge catastrophic events around his gambling, stealing money from me, stealing jewellery. A lot of gaslighting went on, which I didn't realise it at the time, but now I've looked at things. So I would hide money places, because that's who you become, in tins and inside books and on my bookshelf. And I went really to all those lengths. And then I would go back and it would be gone. And I would think, did I spend that? Did I move that from there? I must have done. There's no way he would have known that. There's just no way. And even to this day, there are things that I would like to ask him, and I haven't, that I'd like to say. That there's one particular, I used to have this little tin. It was a little, do you ever remember the cartoon character Tweety Pie, little yellow bird?
I taught a pussycat.
Yeah. And Tweety Pie, when my daughter was a baby, when she used to sleep on her side, she had the same profile, because we've got a little Fenian nose, as my dad would say. And I remember I had this Tweety Pie tin, and I had about 300 quid in this tin that I needed for real important stuff. And I'd hid it really well. And I remember my mummy was over from Ireland, and I can't remember, she wanted some English money for euro. And I said, oh, I've got some money, wait there, and then I'll change it up when I go, and the tin was gone. And I remember in that moment, just again, that kind of sick, my stomach went, I started second guessing, I'm pulling all the cupboards out. My mum's looking at me, said, well, you must have put it somewhere, like, you're not just, and I'm like, I mean, it was about so big and bright, you know, it's got a bright tweet, you know, it's not the sort of thing you can just, you know, misplace. And to this day, and that was at least probably 5 years ago, I still don't know what happened to that tin. Maybe one day I will ask, but I've got to be honest, I haven't, because I just don't want to cause any more pain, really. But little things like that. So there was a lot of that going on, and it kind of become normal. It become normal to sleep with my purse under my pillow. It became normal for me to bury things in the garden. It became normal for me to not go out for weeks on end and not eat because I had to feed my kids. And it became normal for me to pretend to everybody that everything was all right. And it wasn't, because he was spiraling massively. And then one day I went out with some people from work. It was a Friday. I remember it. It was warm. It was unusually warm for that time of year. And I just got to my destination, which was about half an hour from home. And I was just about to switch my phone off because I thought, I'm going to switch off tonight and enjoy myself. And I had a missed call from him. And I thought, why is he calling me? I've not left for very long. I ignored it. Then he phoned again and I said, what's the matter? And he said, you need to come home. And I was like, why? Just come home. Just, I'll tell you when you get here, just come home. And I had a little dog at the time, my little baby. And I thought somebody had opened the door and the dog had run out and got run over. And I just thought, oh God. And then I thought, well, maybe it's my mum. Maybe my mum, something's happened to my mum. I said, just tell me. And he was like, no, you just come home. You need to come home. And all the way driving home, I'm trying to ring each of my kids, because I'm thinking, if they're all right, then everything's all right. Whatever this is, it's going to be all right if they're all right. And I remember trying to get hold of my eldest son, because he had been at my house when I left. And I thought, oh, if it's the dog, he's going to know it's the dog. And I said, are you still at my house? And he was like, no. I was like, well, is everything all right? And he was like, yeah, everything was fine when I left. Okay, only I've just had a call to say I need to get home. Oh, I'll turn around and go back to yours then. Clearly something's wrong. Phoned my younger son. He was like, yeah, I'm okay. Okay. Tried to ring my eldest daughter and she wasn't picking up. Tried to ring my sisters. So my second youngest daughter, who's my sister's, and she said, yeah, I don't know. I said, maybe you need to head to mine. And I remember I got about 5 minutes from home. I can remember exactly where I was in my car, where I stopped at these traffic lights. And all the way home, I'm like, please, God, just let you know, I just was in, you know, when one of those journeys, I don't know if you've ever had one where you've had something like this, and every traffic light's red. Everybody in front of you is driving like they're 105. And you're just like, this, what should be half an hour seems to be taking forever. It was like everything was happening in slow motion. And I remember getting home and walking in the door and him saying to me, your sister's died. And I can just remember wanting to punch him in the face. He said, literally 20 minutes after you left, the police arrived and come to the door and said, Tracy Shaughnessy live here? And he said, I thought you'd been in a car accident. And I said, and he obviously said, yeah. And they said, is she in? He said, and that's when I knew it wasn't you. And then that's when they told him what had happened. And then my kids started to arrive, and all I can remember thinking is, I really hate you. I really hate you. I really hate that all the time I'm focusing on you. I should have been looking somewhere else. I've been so busy rescuing you that I didn't cast the net wide enough. And I certainly wasn't rescuing myself. And it was a tough week. Really, it was tough because the circumstances were not great. And it was a Friday and we couldn't get hold of the police all weekend. So I had no idea exactly what had happened or where they found her. And he was just gambling away till his little heart's content, because clearly that's what you do, don't you, when you're in active addiction and you're stressed and you can't cope with stuff and it's all very traumatic. And, you know, so his gambling was now spiraling out of control. Like, and I know this because I've seen his gambling behaviour. I've seen his his DSAR, so I now know, which wasn't great for me to look back on because I did the worst thing, which I'll come on to at some point. I did the kind of looked at dates and then looked at what he was doing, and then that made it even harder. So, which I'd never advise anybody to do. And those next few weeks were horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And then he stole from his employer and lost his job. And I remember them phoning me up and saying, you know, just really slagging him off, like calling him all the names under the sun and what's wrong with you, and if you had half a brain you'd get out. And I just was literally like, oh, I don't know what's going on here. This just, I can't deal with this. This is just not, I just can't deal with it. And going to him and saying, you know, what have you done? What have you done? How could you do that now of all times? Now, like, how has this even happened? You know, what's wrong with you? It's always about you. You're so, you know, all that kind of normal. You're so selfish. So he had obviously been stealing and knew that at some point he was going to get caught. And again, unbeknownst to me, he had applied for another job somewhere else. I'm not going to say what he does because it will identify him. And he worked in a very specific space, doing a very, very specific job that not many people can do in the world. And it was to do with cars, let's put it that way. And he had gone to this other person and they were keen to take him on because of what he could do. So he was very sort of, oh, I've got another job lined up, blah, 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 I'll be all right. Like, just really dismissive of the fact that you've done this in the first place. And I'm trying to deal with what at that moment in time was, and still is really actually, the most traumatic, devastating event of my life. I thought losing my dad was bad enough, but this was like different level for me. So the next minute he's got a job interview and I'm thinking, oh, thank the good Lord, right? Let's just make this okay. But the guy knew what he had done to his other employer because it's a small space and they all talk to each other. So this is not the first time, this is now the second time he's done it. And they'd obviously rung and said, listen, if he's coming to you for a job, which he inevitably is going to, you need to know that he's done this. Anyway, this guy was willing to give him a go, but wanted me to go to the interview. Can you imagine? I was not in a good space, let me tell you. I was angry. I was so angry. I was broken. I was broken. And I remember sitting in this office with him sitting next to me, and I actually want to kill him. I'm going to be honest about that. With this guy basically berating him, look at your wife, look what you've done to her, blah, blah. And I'm just sitting there thinking, is this actually happening? It's like, why am I putting myself through? And I remember just saying, look, can we stop this? Can we just stop? Because I've just lost my sister and I don't really need this shit, to be fair. You know, whatever is going on here, like, you're either going to give him the job or you're not, but I don't want to be part of this. And he started telling him, you know, I've got a gambling addiction. And, you know, then this guy started saying, oh, well, you know, I had somebody that was an alcoholic and I put him in the Priory. And suddenly I just thought, oh, actually, do you know what? This might be a good idea that he comes here because these people seem quite understanding. This could actually be like a bit of a rescue situation. You know, I'm going to have, anyway, so cutting a long story short, the guy said, you know, I'm going to have to think about it. I'm going to speak to my associates. I'll get back to you, you know, whatever. So then a couple of hours later, he rang me up and he said, look, I'm going to give him an opportunity, but I'm going to give him this opportunity because of you. So the deal was going to be that his wages have to be paid into your account. I thought, happy days. This is like the best thing ever. This is going to be the best thing ever. It's answer to a prayer. Okay, thanks for that. Really helpful. You know, he said, you know, we're going to, you know, monitor him, etc., etc. He won't work alone. All these kind of safeguard things, you know, eyes wide open type attitude, which I thought was really refreshing. This is great. This guy's all right. This is going to work for me. This is going to be right. Maybe we'll get out of this. Things sort of settled down. He was working, and then it just reared its ugly head. So, and this is something I think people don't take into consideration for impacted others, is that added pressure of then and I don't like using the money. I don't like using the terminology of controlling the money, because you're an adult. When we're in a relationship with you, we don't want to be your mum. We want to be your partner. You know, we're your intimate partner, although there was no intimacy in our relationship at all at this point, because he was just so into his addiction that, you know, all that goes out the window, doesn't it? All that connection, all those conversations, all those meals out, all of that a normal relationship, the things that connect you as a couple, all that's gone. That's not, you know, I'm getting up in the morning, he's asleep on the sofa because unbeknown to me, he's gambling through the night. I'm just thinking he's watching a film and he's falling asleep on the sofa. I'm now in the deepest, darkest form of grief and trauma that anyone could ever experience. Bearing in mind, that's my trained background. So I'm now questioning everything about myself, all my abilities to do the job that I do, who I am as a person, who I am as a parent, trying to hold my sister's child together. I mean, she was a grown adult, but, you know, there's a lot to hold together, holding space for everybody. And he's, you know, every month I used to dread it. I used to dread payday.
Gamban blocks thousands of gambling websites and betting apps on your devices. Once it's installed, these sites simply don't open. The worst part about my gambling addiction wasn't losing the money, it was waking up the next day and pretending like nothing had happened. That voice that tells you just one more and then I'll stop, or I'll stop. But tomorrow comes and that cycle starts again. Another bet, another loss, and another promise to quit. That's the trap of gambling, when it's always right there on your phone. Willpower alone isn't enough when gambling is just one click away. And that's why tools like Gamban can be so powerful. And when gambling isn't constantly in front of you, something changes. Your brain finally gets space to reset, space to think, and space to recover. So if you're serious about taking back control, install Gamban today. The link's below. Put a little bit of friction between you and that first bet.
The week leading up to payday, he just turned into a monster. I need this month. I need that this month. I'm going to need an extra this. I'm going to need, because I've got to pay for this course. I've got to go on. And with all the will in the world, I would be saying, well, can you show me proof of that, this course, you know? Oh, it's just a thing for, you know, and you get so beaten down by it. You're so exhausted. And I was already exhausted that I would just transfer him his, and I'm going to say allowance, because that's the only way I can describe it. And it was a lot of money, you know, bearing in mind that was his disposable income. So all the bills would be paid. He didn't have a bill in his name. As far as I was aware, he didn't have a debt in his name. How naive of me. So the money that I was giving him was purely for his own use. I'm thinking for lunch, for petrol, for, you know, whatever. And looking back on it, what an idiot. What an idiot. Because, you know, I was giving him a large disposable income every month, and he was just, that would be gone in a couple of hours. And then the rest of the time, unbeknown to me, he's beg, borrowing and stealing. And then COVID hit, and I thought, happy days, bookies are shut. It's going to be great. This is going to be really helpful. Because he was very much a land-based gambler, and he was very much a sports gambler. Thankfully, he didn't go into slots or casinos, thankfully, because I don't think I'd be here now. Literally, I probably wouldn't be here. And I don't know if he would either, actually. because throughout this journey, and I've kind of skipped over that, which I probably shouldn't have, there were several suicide attempts by him, several. Or threats of suicide. If you don't give me this money, I'm going to jump under a train. If you don't give me this money, I'm going to hang myself in the woods. If you don't give me this money, my death will be on your hands. If you don't give me money, I'm going to get killed by a gang I've borrowed money from. And the pressure and the toll that takes on you is immeasurable. So COVID hit. He wasn't furloughed. Most people were in his workplace. He wasn't furloughed. He was going into work most days because of the work that he was doing. He was able to continue it because there were deadlines that his boss needed to meet, and he could go in and do his own thing and lock up at the end of the day. And I just thought, happy days, the money's going in the bank. I can pay the bills. I'll just keep going, I knew he was gambling, but I didn't want to look at it. I just didn't want to look at it. I just thought, we'll be all right. As long as everything's paid, we're going to be all right. And then one day he didn't come home from work. And I thought, oh, maybe he's had an accident. Normal stuff, ring the ambulance, ring the hospitals, ring his pals at work. And everybody at work knew he had a gambling addiction. I skipped that bit because he was borrowing money off people at work. And a couple of them I'd got to know. And so they were telling me. And in the end, I had to say, listen, please, if you don't do it for him, do it for me. Don't lend him money. We haven't got it. I can't pay it back to you. You're not helping him. He's going to tell you all sorts of stories about me or threats to his life or whatever. I don't care what they are. I don't care what he says to you. Do not lend him money. You're just causing further harm to him and to me. So he didn't come home from work. And I remember ringing one of his work friends and saying, was everything all right at work today? Because it's like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock and he hasn't come home. Yeah, he seemed all right. This person was lying to me because the boss had told everybody at work, you are not to talk to anybody about what happened today. So the first I knew, it was about 3 a.m. and I heard car doors bang, and I looked out the window and it was the police, and I just knew. But in that, there was also that kind of trauma response of what I had with my sister. Are they coming to tell me that he's dead? But that was in a fleeting second. What kind of really come to mind was he's stolen from work. And I went downstairs. I had a long sort of t-shirty thing on to sort of just above the knee. And I went downstairs, I opened the door a little bit. Bearing in mind, it's not my first rodeo. I've been through lots of situations like this with my sister. So they said, blah, 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 just blah, 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 live here. We need to come in and search property. So I said, you need to show me the warrant first. So they showed me the warrant and I read it. And I opened the door a little bit more. And then I just said, do you mind if I go and put some more clothes on? To which they said no. So I went into the lounge and sat down and sort of pulled my thing down a little bit more. And I said, you're not going in that room because that's my son's room and you're not going in there. So I said, if you tell me what you're looking for, I might be able to help, And they were just really arrogant and rude, really disrespectful, saying things to me like, don't be stupid, don't act stupid, we know who you are. You don't, you might be acting stupid, but it's just really derogatory, horrible kind of stuff. Came into my bedroom. One of them sat on my bed, which I felt was quite inappropriate. And I said, can you not sit on my bed next to me like that? Can I put some more clothes on? And after about an hour and a half, they didn't find anything. Luckily, I had a teenage son that would sleep through World War III, so he didn't wake up, which was amazing. I was so pleased about that because I was so worried about the impact that it would have on him, because he'd been through quite a lot with me and his dad, and I didn't want him to be kind of re-traumatized by anything. And just as they were leaving, I just kept saying, is he okay? Like, is he okay? Has he got solicitor? Is his mental health? Because I'm just thinking his world will be crashing down right now. And he's probably got huge thoughts of suicide. I didn't doubt that for 1 minute. And they were like, yeah, he's got a solicitor. I said, well, have you got a number I can call so I can check on his well-being? Yeah. Wrote a number down. That number wasn't a real number. And then as they left, they thought it would be a good idea to say to me, well, you do know he's got a gambling addiction. And that was a drop moment for me, because in that moment, I thought, what if I didn't? And you were just giving me that piece of information. I could be he could come home and batter me. There was no duty of care. I could have an addiction myself. My whole world could have been crashing down in that moment. There was no like, well, he has revealed to us that he's got a gambling addiction. Do you know about it? Do you need us to refer you? So are you going to be okay? Is there any violence in your relationship? There was none of that. It was literally said as a spiteful comment. And I remember thinking, you absolute bastards. That was cruel. That was meant to harm me. You did that to harm me. So I remember it got to about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, I need to find where he is. I need to know he's okay. So I phoned my daughter, bless her heart. She's just been amazing. It's like, she's just so amazing, so understanding and empathetic. And she was like, "Oh, come over, Mum. And if anything, I'll go to the police station." So I said, okay. So we were just kind of getting ready to do that, and he walked through the door probably about 10:30, something like that, and he looked like death. He was unrecognisable, and his first words to me was, "I just need to die, Tracy. I just need to die. I've got this monster in my head and I can't get rid of it. I'm going to go to prison, but I think I just need to die." And I said, well, that's not going to happen on my watch, because I can't lose another person to addiction. I'm just not going to have it. I remember I was really matter of fact. I'm not going to have it. It's not going to happen. And he sat down and I said, "What's happened?" And he said, "I've been stealing hundreds and thousands of pounds worth of stuff from my work and I'm going to prison." And I was like, okay, we need to get some help. Did you have a solicitor? Did you go no comment? What did you do? He said, "No, I just told him everything. I told him the truth. I've got a raging gambling addiction. I can't help it. I need to go to prison. I'm a bad person, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, I need to get you some help. And that was my first thought. I need to get you some help. And that's what I did. So basically, for a few years leading up to this event, I had done a bit of Googling, and unfortunately, wonderful people like you were very far and few between. So I'd been sort of typing in, help for living with a gambling addict, blah, blah. Nothing ever really came up. And then on Instagram, I saw a guy called Darren, who was doing his own kind of little blog on Insta around his addiction. And I had messaged him a few times and he had given me some advice. Great guy up in Scotland. He'd given me some advice. And on this morning, I messaged him and said, "My partner's just been released from custody and I don't know what to do. He's in a really bad way. I'm really worried he's going to try and end his life. I need to get him some help." And he said, "I'm going to be speaking to a guy called Steve this morning, who runs an organisation called GamFam, and a guy called Tony." And I was like, right, okay. He said, "I'll ask him if I can it's all right if I pass him your number." And I said, "Oh, please do, because I'm really desperate. I don't know what to do. I'm really worried. He's in the house at the moment and I'm frightened to let him leave because I think he's going to try and end his life." And then I think within a couple of hours, I was on the phone to Steve, just in floods of tears. I need to get him some help. I don't know what to do. Didn't mention myself once. I need to get him some help. I don't know what to do. We're at crisis. We've nearly lost our home. I'm in so much debt. He's now stolen from his employer. It's back on me again. I can't cope, And he said, my friend Tony's going to ring you. He's going to help you get a solicitor that's got some gambling harm background. That will help. Have a conversation with him. Get your partner to have a conversation with him. Do you think your partner will talk to me? And I was like, yeah, I think so, but not right in this minute. He said, because I can get him onto a group. I can put him in touch with our recovery person. And also I can get you on a group. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, we run groups for you. And I'm like, what? Sorry? He's like, yeah, we run groups for... And I'm like, no, I'm all right. And he was like, well, you're not, are you, actually? And I'm like, no, I'm not. He said, actually, we've got a group tonight. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I might try and come to that group. Admittedly, I didn't go to that group that night because, as you can imagine, I was exhausted. The day was a lot. I then had another conversation with Tony, who's Tony Parente, who is now my boss. And he shared his story with me, which really resonated and made me suddenly think, oh, my God, he's not on his own. He's not the only person that's done this. And he said, you know, and I'm going to give you this number for a solicitor, give him a ring and go from there, which I did. But again, you're probably getting a pattern here. It was all on me because obviously they'd taken his phone. And so it was me contacting the solicitors. It was me sending the emails. It was me setting up the meetings. It was me. And I just thought, oh my God, this is just going from bad to worse. So the following week, I joined my first Affected Other GamFam group with other family members whose loved one was a gambling addict. And for the first 15 minutes, I cried. With lots of people going, it's okay, take your time. I know. It's like, you know, the whole shebang, like that real ugly cry. But suddenly I thought, wow, I'm not on my own. You know, these people are not going, oh, that's terrible. He's terrible. A terrible human being. They were just going, we hear you. It's okay. You'll be all right. You'll get through it. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is like something else. This is great. And then he was really reluctant to engage in any sort of support. He was obviously clearly in that guilt and shame stage of I don't want to go on a group. I don't want to talk to people. I'm just a piece of shit. People are going to judge me, blah, blah, blah. I can't get well. It's never going to happen for me. So he was really in a hole. And then I think I went to another meeting and then said to him after that, if you don't go to a meeting, if you don't get some help, it's going to be a deal breaker for me. And I remember even saying to him then, I don't know if we'll be together at the end of this, but I will get you through it. So sitting, that masochistic part of me of sitting in that pain, but sort of saying, but I'm looking at an exit at the end of it. And I remember him saying to me, I get that. I get it. I get that, you know, we're not in a good place and I really appreciate it. And he started going to meetings. He started going to GamFam meetings. He went, I think, to a couple. And then he didn't go. And I remember my daughter came over one Saturday morning because he was meant to go to a Saturday morning meeting. And my daughter came over and she marched over and she was like, right. So, you know, my mum's going to meetings. You've completely wrecked our lives, blah, blah, blah. And you're laying in bed and you can't bother to do anything. If you're not going to bother to do anything, you might as well get out. You might as well you're on your own. And he was like, oh, stuff is when you do stuff like this, it makes me want to gamble. And I can remember just being like, stop with that shit. Stop it. You are not going to do that to us anymore. I'm not having it. If you are not willing to engage in recovery for yourself, then stop. This has to stop now. You cannot do that. You cannot put that on us. You just can't. So if you're not going to engage, you're just going as a tick box exercise, then it's got to stop. It's got to end. I have to hand this over to you. I can't carry it. And then he was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm just finding it really hard. I feel so ashamed, whatever. And then he pretty much immersed himself in recovery. He did epic stuff, like Epic Restart. He did a couple of weekends away with them. He was going to go to Gordon Moody. and do the rehab, but he couldn't because the judge wouldn't let him go. That would certainly change now around the work that we do, but at the time, I think going in front of a judge and saying this person's got a gambling addiction, and that it was just kind of like, they're like, whatever. So he threw himself into his meetings, and I threw myself into mine. And I soon realised that I wasn't there for him. It was a game changer for me. I'm here for me. And I say that because I facilitate groups now, and it's something that I say to people when they come to my group, right? We do our little ground rules, you know, just safe space for you. This is where you can like let it all go, get it all out there, you know. But this is your recovery group. You are not here for your partner. You are not here for your husband, your wife, your son. You are here for you. This is your space. This is your process, you know, and treat it as such. Yes, you're going to talk about them, but I'm always going to bring it back to you. And they were an absolute game changer and a life changer for me. However, I was in a group that was all parents. I was the only partner. I loved my group and I loved everyone in it, and they were amazing. And I'll be forever grateful for them for getting me through some of the hardest times of my life. But none of their loved ones had committed crime. So I found myself not talking about that added part of it, that journey running alongside my recovery and his. It was like it was this hidden thing. Oh, it's just another layer of shit that I don't really want to talk to people about. But what I also didn't do was that I didn't tell any of my friends, so no one else knew. Only my eldest daughter. None of my other kids knew either, and neither did his, because he had a son. And it was a lot. It was a lot for me to deal with. It was a lot. And I was just preparing for him to go to prison, and thinking how I'm going to factor that into my life. I'd done that before, obviously, with my sister, and I know how challenging that is. And I'm thinking, how am I going to factor visits into my life, the cost of it? And it was an added stigma and an added layer of shame. So I'm going to my groups, and they were helpful, and I'm not getting away from that. But I wasn't really talking about some of the stuff that I felt I really needed to talk about. I was still hiding it. I was still in that shameful sort of space. And also that kind of wanting to protect him as well, because that is what looking back now, that is what I had been doing. And something I've done a really lot of work on myself, and anyone that knows me will go, oh, here she goes, is enablement. The realisation for me that I had been a huge enabler for him. Because one thing I would never do is give my sister money, because I had this fear that if I ever gave her money and she bought drugs with it and she died, it would be on me. I would buy her food, I would buy clothes, anything, but I wouldn't give her money. But I gave him money, lots of it. And so I then took that on. And then I had this whole well, if I had given him more money in his allowance, would he have then stolen that money? And it was a conversation that I ended up having with him. It was on a train coming back from Leeds. I'll never forget, because there's a famous story about me actually wanting to kick him off the train as it was going at 150 miles an hour from Leeds. That was a huge realisation for me. That hit hard, that I had enabled his behaviour. Maybe not even realizing it or understanding the complexity of it, but I had the reality is I had, and that was tough for me, really a tough one. And I still do a lot of work on that now, I've got to be really honest. But I wasn't talking about it to anyone, because you know what, I just was in such a bad place that if one person had said to me at that point, oh, well, this is it now, surely you're going to leave him, or surely you're going to kick him out, I would have just lost that friendship. Because firstly, where am I going? I've got no money, literally. I'm holding on to my home by a thread, literally by a thread. And then I did the dreaded DSAR. So that was one of the worst moments, because it was in that moment that I realised what a bad way we were in, and what a bad way he had been in, because I could see every gambling transaction. I could see every amount of money that he had put in. I could see literally. So, he would deposit £50,000. Bearing in mind, his wages weren't being paid into this account. He was putting in £50,000, and every transaction was gambling. Every single one. Not a sandwich, not a coffee, not a taxi, like every single one, till that money went. Then £20,000, gamble, 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 gamble. A few days later, £40,000, gamble, gamble, gamble. Why was this not flagged up? Then I did the worst thing ever. Started looking at dates. Oh, so we were at my daughter's wedding. We're at my daughter's wedding, and you were gambling £30,000 sitting next to me. Or we're at my sister's funeral, or what, you know what I mean? Worst thing I could have done. But on top of that, it was the realisation then that I was in debt as well. So he had taken out a lot of fraudulent debt in my name. And I remember just thinking, what am I going to do? I can't go to the police. He's already going to go to prison. It's like, things are very different now, by the way. There are different processes, and I didn't know what the processes were then. I probably could have got more help than I did. And there's certainly more help out there now, and that is something that I do work with people that I work with now. It's very different situation. But then it was just literally like, I'm just going to have to suck this up, which I did. As well as paying off all my own debt that I had accrued with very high credit cards and stuff just to get through. So I was just like in a really bad way, a really bad way. I was still grieving my sister. I'm still holding this space. I'm still turning up as probably not my authentic self at meetings, because I'm not really telling them everything. So I'm doing that whole kind of like, oh yeah, everything's all right. And it wasn't really. And I remember I went to bed one night and I just thought, I've just got to end this. I can't do this anymore. And I thought about the easiest way to do it without any of my kids finding me. That was not what I wanted for them. So I worked out how I was going to do it. I worked out where I was going to do it. And I sat down and I wrote my kids letters to each of them, explaining why I'd done it, and set off. I had this peace. I had this peace in my life. I had this overwhelming sense of peace and relief that this pain and this constant fear and shame and fight or flight and anxiety just went. It just completely went, because I knew it was going to be over. And that, strangely, in my head, I thought, if I do this, he will get well. It will make him get well. Even though probably the complete opposite would have happened, wouldn't it? Let's be honest, because the guilt and shame, he probably would have ended up taking his life. But then there was a divine intervention, and I really do believe that it was a divine intervention, where my phone went and I wasn't going to answer my phone because I just didn't want any interruption. I'd made my mind up. I was in a good place. It was going to be over soon. And my phone went, and it was my very, very, very dear friend who was like a mum to me. I didn't have a fabulous relationship with my mum. And this person had come into my life many years before and become the mum that I really needed. And she gave me some really terrible news that she had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and that she wanted me to be her soul midwife, which is a death doula, somebody that the work that I did is you stay with somebody during their end of life journey. And she said, I really need you to be there with me. I want you to be my person. I've never shared this, by the way, this part of the story. And I knew in that moment that I had to be there for her. And so I never went through with it. And she saved my life, even though she never knew that. But she did. So I kind of carried on. luckily for him, we had a really understanding judge. I still think now, looking back on it and the work that I do now, I think he had some gambling harm experience himself, some lived experience, because he did something really at that time, although we've just had a case where they've done it recently. He deferred sentence. He said to him, I am going to allow you to go off for 6 months and continue with your recovery journey. I can see that you have put great things in place. It's the first time you've been in any sort of recovery. And so therefore I'm going to let you go off for 6 months. And then when you come back, I will sentence you. And we went back and he was given a suspended sentence, which was, I was gobsmacked, because the amount that he stole was like, 100 times more than he was convicted of. And the first time he was convicted, he was given, a tag, and all those kinds of things, as I said earlier on in my journey, that I didn't know about. So this time I was sure he's going to prison. He was told, you're going to prison. His solicitor said, you're going to prison. And the fact that this judge, I just do think that this judge had some lived experience. It's just something I really do think about. And he got a suspended sentence. So that enabled him to carry on with his recovery. And he did. He did lapse about a year later. But the first time ever, he told me. So I think that was a testament to the work that he'd put in, myself personally. He just came home and he said, I've gambled. I thought I'd be all right. I thought I could manage it, and I can't. And I was like, okay, so what are you going to do? Rather than, what can I do? See, I learned something there. What are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to get on my group tonight. I said, yeah, you do that, which he did. And he told his group. However, the next morning, it was about 5 o'clock, my phone went, and it was someone from his group. And they said, is he with you? And I'm like, no, he's gone to work, because he'd managed to get a job at this point now. He said, I've had this message from him. He's going to end his life. I was like, oh, God, hold on, let me a minute. I've gone downstairs and he'd laid out his phone, his wallet, like everything. And I just thought, oh, my God, I can't even contact him. So I said, okay, I'm going to need to phone the police. I phoned the police came. They didn't have a clue about gambling addiction. Of course they didn't. And I just had to ring people up and say, I rang up the facilitator of his group, and he was like, no, he seemed all right on the group. He shared about his lapse. Yeah, no indication that this was coming. Anyway, eventually the police found him, and he then went into further treatment, which was really helpful, which was a bit of a turnaround for him, I think. He had some proper clinical treatment as well as alongside his peer support. So he started seeing an NHS clinician around his gambling, which was really a bit of a game changer for him. And he continued in his recovery. And as far as I'm aware, and because that's all I can say, as far as I'm aware, he's still in recovery. But then what happened for me, so I was still going to my groups, and then Steve, who ran GamFam at the time, came to me one day and said, would you like to do some facilitator training? I think you'd be all right at it. And I was like, well, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's for me. And he was like, well, do the training and see how you feel. You don't have to run a group, but just do the training. And I was like, all right, then. I like a bit of training. I'll give it a go. And I did. And then I think about 6 weeks after that, I was running my own group for partners. And I loved it. Absolutely just loved it. I thought this is, because also that, running my own group, it was the first time I was going into a group with just partners. And it was a very different perspective, because in my own group, and I'm still going to my group, was parents. So suddenly I'm hearing all these stories that I could really relate to. And again, that was a game changer for me, because it started to make me realise, and I had realised, but even more so, it kind of brought it home even more. This was never about me. He wasn't doing it to me because I annoyed him, so he went out and gambled. He wasn't doing it to me because I wasn't enough, or I was too much, or I was miserable, or I was over the top, or any of those things, because I could hear these stories coming back at me, and I could relate to each and every one of them. But what also came back at me was, I don't know who my partner is. I don't know who my husband is. I'm laying next to him at night thinking, who even are you? I've been laying next to you for the past 10, 15, 20 years, and all the time you've been living this secret life. And I hear that a lot. So I continued being a facilitator at GamFam for probably a couple of years, I think. And I really loved it. And they're a great organisation that do great work. So they run recovery groups for gamblers in recovery, and they run various different groups for parents, partners, siblings, as well as, you know, other stuff, and they're great. But what still was the thing for me was the crime side of things, that wasn't something that was really openly spoken about in the gambling recovery space, or not that I was aware of anyway. And then one of the ladies in my group, her husband committed crime to fund his gambling, and I can't remember if it was me, it may have been, I can't actually remember, put her in touch with Tony Parente and said, this person helped me. And then I met somebody else, I'm not going to mention his name for legal reasons, who said, well, I work for Tony, or I'm going to work with Tony, and would you be happy to like carry on supporting the wife? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And that's when I first kind of gelled with GamLearn, because I was supporting this woman, although she was coming to my GamFam group, going to court and supporting her with GamLearn, but not as an employee or anything. And then I went and did some training with GamLearn. I actually did some suicide prevention training and went on to do my city and guilds in that, which I really appreciate GamLearn for putting me forward for that. And then Tony came to me and he said, do you fancy doing some safeguarding for us? And I was like, yeah, all right then, I don't mind. And then I ended up on their AP. And then I ended up in their video for their gambling harm training. And then I ended up delivering it. And now I run a group, and now I run the whole service for impacted others whose loved ones have turned to crime to fund their gambling. So it's kind of gone full circle. Yeah. So you can ask me any questions about that if you like.
I love seeing you smiling and laughing and giggling at the end here, because wow, what a journey you've been on. Like me and you spoke at the start before we started recording about why we both do what we do, and I know why you're here with me telling your story, and I know it's not for sympathy, it's not to think poor me. And I've been trying to think of the word. I'm like, I wanted to say like, I feel so sorry for it. Like, just at 20 years old, you're already your sister's carer from 18. That happened with your dad at 19. I know that's why you're not doing it, and I've been rattling around in my brain trying to word it better than I feel sorry. I'm rubbish with words. The only way I can describe it is that I wish we were face to face in the studio, because I would have got up and hugged you, and I would have sat there for the rest of your story just with my arm around you. I just wanted to stick my arm up and put my arms around you and listen to your story, like being there, like physically supporting you. Just wow. Like I know why you're telling your story. You said, if it helps one person, if me telling my story, if one person can relate to it, if one person feels less alone, if one person gets what you got from your GamFan meetings, then it's all worth it. And just wow, like you're brave isn't the word either. Just like how you've been able to put all of that out there. Again, I'm rubbish with words. I was like courageous, just so selfless. Like you're spilling all that out there, trying to help other people, and that's been a massive theme throughout your story, sometimes for the better, sometimes not, which I've got a few questions on as well. I said at the start, I'll let you tell your story. Every 5 or 6 minutes when you take a pause, I'll go through my notes. You didn't take many pauses. I've got a full book of notes, so
I should have warned you of that.
I'm only joking. But what I'd written down pretty early, you must have said it about 3 or 4 times very early on, where you were like, how naive of me, how stupid of me, I shouldn't have believed it. And I wrote down, stop beating yourself up. Like, Surely you know from the work that you've done for how many years have you
100%.
done gambling?
Oh, so I've been working in this space now for 4.5 years. So I've been at Gamlen for just over 2 years.
Okay, so
Yeah.
surely you know from all the work that you do
100%.
that. And then you kept
100%.
saying, like, I'm making it all about me. Then you did speak at the end about how it wasn't about you. But at the same time, when you were saying that I've now got to suffer these consequences, that's completely within, like, it's understandable how you think like this, because it's impacting you so much. Like that's a massive part of what I want to get across in hearing your story. It's you're impacted so much without actually doing the behavior, without suffering with the addiction, but it impacts you just as much as it impacted him. And I just wanted to say, like,
100%.
stop beating yourself up. I can see you've still got a lot of guilt there. How do you process the blame and stuff now? I imagine doing what you do for the last 2 years has really helped. It's not like, I'm not going to say like a work in progress, but I imagine like as you're doing the work that you're doing, it's helping you in your own recovery simultaneously.
100%. And as I said to you, I've got a great therapist. I really focus on my own well-being. I do a lot of meditation. I always have done. And I'm very reflective. So I know how I've probably told my story there. It probably sounds really, really awful, and that you're right. I still do have those little moments of reflection. Where could I have done that differently? And I think that's a healthy way to do it, because I'm now, if I had, £1 for every time I have that first call with somebody that comes into my service and they'll say, I had no idea. How did I not know? I'll say, okay, like, let me stop you there. I'll tell them a little bit about me, and I'll go, and I didn't know either. So, if that makes you feel any better, gambling addiction is it's known as the hidden addiction. But over the years, I think when you look at your person and you reflect back, you can see that there are changes in their behaviour, changes in their appearance, they withdraw, etc., etc. But they don't present the same as somebody that's, taken heroin or drinking alcohol to excess or whatever. So it is very hidden, and it's part of it's part of the disorder itself, isn't it? Is those behaviours? It's a behavioural addiction. We know that. So, I've learned a lot on my journey, not just from my own story, but sitting in the dark with others. And so I am a lot easier on myself. There are times when I have to go back and look at things, because someone might say something to me and it will make me go, oh, I remember that. Oh, that was a bit, but I'm definitely in the position now to work through that. Have I forgiven myself for some of the mistakes I've made? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I didn't cause my partner's addiction. Were there times when I enabled it? Yes. Was that intentional? No. And these are conversations that, I have with family members every day. Be kind to yourself. Love yourself. Meet yourself where you're at in that moment. Ask yourself what would you have done differently? You didn't know, so therefore you didn't do. You do know now, so therefore you have, and we have a little process that we go through around what I call kind of personal audit. So, for example, things like putting on gambling blocks. A lot of people don't think of that as a family member. I think that's a really important safeguard. Do I wish I had done it? Absolutely. Did I know about it? No. So, that's something I'll go through all my individuals with. Let's do that. They're normally quite surprised. Oh, I don't need to do that. I don't gamble. No, you do need to do it. Trust me. Credit file checks, things like that. Looking at just ways to not just protect themselves, but to protect their person as well, because we know lapses happen. People generally come to Gamlen in a time of crisis. So therefore they're kind of really like rabbit in the headlights, and life's crashing down and it all becomes a bit much.
I've partnered with Incremental, a brand new recovery support app, and I'm now serving as a coach inside their platform. I'm in there supporting people in the hard moments, helping build accountability.
The best part is they've given me a special offer for my community. Use my code Daniel, DANIEL, when you sign up to the annual plan, and you'll get 3 months completely free, which basically means a 90-day free trial.
You shouldn't have to do this alone, and that's where Incremental comes in. Join through the details in the description below, and you'll get exclusive access to me, along with access to all the amazing recovery support tools that are there 24/7 for you to use.
So being able to use my experience and my training, because I've done lots of training in addiction recovery and safeguarding and lots of other things, that I'm able to hold space for people. I'm not one to say, well, you should do this or you should. No. It's very much like, okay, how are you feeling in this moment? Is there anything that you think might help? And what does that look like? And can I support you with that? Because it has to be that person's, everyone's individual. But what I will say, and what I find a lot, which comes across a lot in my groups particularly, is this difference in recovery pathways of, well, my partner is up there with their recovery and they're like almost looking over their shoulder and going, come on, keep up, what's wrong with you? We're not at the same speed. And my answer to that always is, because I think particularly with the demographic of individuals that we work with who have committed crime to fund their gambling, there's been just a bombshell. There's been either I've lost my job, or I've been arrested, or I'm going to be arrested, or whatever. And it's like it's come crashing down. But there's that element of relief. It's out there now. Everyone knows. I've told my wife, as awful as it is, or I've told my husband, or I've told my whatever. And there for the gambler in recovery, there's that element of relief. There's still that guilt and shame, and I'm not parking that, but there is an element of relief. It's out there. However, without them realising, quite often than not, their relief gets handed over to us as something we're expected to carry and unravel. And quite often we'll visualise it as like a huge ball of string all ravelled up with just one little bit coming out that we've got to go in and pick and start to unravel what is our lives. And as I said to you earlier, I hear so many people say to me, I don't even know this person, Tracy. How could this have been going on without me knowing? Who is this person? I've been married to my husband for however, how did I not know? What's wrong with me? And it's those things that I hear that I'm able to then go, okay, let's work through this. Let's look at this. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that you didn't, or, let's see this. And part of what I do is getting my group, my amazing group of people, to understand what gambling disorder is. Because I think once you understand it and you understand the complexities of it and the layers of it, it helps you firstly understand your person so you can help them on their journey, but more important, understand yourself. Because as I said to you earlier, I used to make it about me. Oh, am I not enough? Am I too much? Am I this? Am I that? Am I da, da, da. And then when I learned to understand a bit more about the addiction, about the disorder, about the behaviours that come into play, I realised, and that came from hearing other gamblers, by the way, that came from hearing other gamblers in recovery sharing, because I've gone to a lot of groups and I've shared on a lot of gambler in recovery groups about my journey, and then hearing their story really helped me. And then what I found was they're saying to me, hearing your stories really helped me understand my wife or my mum or whatever. So yeah, sometimes I do have those little pinches, I'm not going to lie, but I've now got the tools which I try to really work on with the people that I support, to give them those tools for themselves to live alongside, because that's another thing. It doesn't just go away. Certainly doesn't just go away for us. There are harms that get re-harmed definitely through the criminal process. Families get re-traumatized, re-harmed by a really out-of-date draconian system. But it helps them navigate their own journey a bit better and feel a bit stronger in themselves. Because to me, that's really important more than anything, is that you have to put yourself first. And I've had to really work on that. And to have those boundaries. I mean, we do a lot of boundary work in my group. We, we're working hard to get alongside and walk alongside. And the realization is this doesn't just go away. We have to learn to trust their process. We don't necessarily, and this is a big one, and I think this is a big one for people in recovery. And this is something that people have said to me a lot when my wife trusts me again. And I have to be really honest and go, she may never trust you again. And you have to accept that if you're going to work at your relationship, that comes slowly. But what I do talk to people about in my group is trusting their person's process, because there's a difference, in my opinion. And it's only in my opinion. And that tends to work better. Let's try and trust their process. Let's try and trust their recovery pathway. Let's try and trust that what they're engaging in is going to really work for them. And in turn, obviously reflect on you. And you're over here doing your recovery work and understanding more about this, that you're able to see in them those little triggers, those little pinches, those little flickers of something's not quite right. And hopefully have the ability to sit down as a couple and talk about it. It doesn't come easy, and it comes with a lot of time and a lot of hard work. And for some, it doesn't come.
The thing that you spoke about that I'm not sure of the word of, where you were able to see all the transactions across the dates specifically.
The DSAR, yeah.
What
the subject access request.
When you got into that, what hurt more? Like seeing the facts and the figures, seeing the actual amounts, and seeing all that fraudulent debt that was put on your name, or seeing like those moments that you described, like your daughter's wedding, your sister's funeral, he was actually gambling on those days. What would you say was more of an emotional pull to you?
If I'm going to be really honest, it was seeing how bad it was for him. I can remember looking and thinking, you've gambled straight for like 10 hours. Like, you must have taken your phone into the toilet. You must have. When did you stop to eat? It gave me an insight into clearly what was going on in his head. He must have been just consumed, just completely stripped and devoid of anything else outside that space. You know, and if it's land-based gambling, I'm thinking in my mind, because I have quite an imaginative brain, because I do a lot of visualization work, and I'm like thinking, I can imagine the whole process of putting the bet on and leaving the bookies or not leaving the bookies, and then like that. So that was what came to me first and foremost, was just the amount and where he must have been in his head, and physically the effect that must have had on him. And then after I kind of got over that, it was the cross-referencing, which was a big mistake. And I'm supporting somebody at the moment who's just done the same thing. And I've actually said to her, leave it now. Like, maybe put it down for a bit. Like, ask yourself, what are you getting from this? Like, is it going to change anything? To which she said, no, it just makes me feel sick. And I'm like, well, maybe you just need to leave it. And that's easy for me to say. But I got to a point where I just had to leave it, because I was angry. I was getting angry at him. And bringing up stuff that he couldn't change. And that's not making an excuse for him. It's not. But I felt like I was just bashing him over the head with a stick, and I just thought, it's just not going to get us anywhere, is it? But it was painful. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. It was incredibly painful to see. But the realisation, the amounts and the activity was shocking. Shocked me beyond. And I'm going to be honest, I'm just going to say it, I had no idea it was that bad. Although I did know it was bad. But seeing it in black and white, it was shocking. And obviously the work that I do now, that's part of what we do. We do get people's DSARs to help them recover stolen funds, et cetera, to pay back to the victim of the crime. It's a huge part of someone's mitigation. It's a huge part of piece of work that we do at GamLearn. And it's an important piece of work. If money can be paid back to victims of crime, that can only be a good thing. It's not about getting people off of sentences. It's about, for people making amends and doing the right thing. And and minimising the harm, certainly. But, you know, for me now, I mean, I don't see those necessarily because they're part of the other group. They're part of the Gamblers in Recovery, but obviously their partners or whatever will be talking to me about it. And again, it's that devastation of, you know, I knew this was happening, but now I've seen it in black and white, Tracy. It's just, it's nothing I could even comprehend. And to me, that just makes me realise how unwell, and I'm going to say that, unwell people are in those moments. You know, that they're gripped by this addiction that I think still even today not a lot of people really understand. Certainly in the drug and alcohol space, gambling is definitely seen as like, oh, not the same. Certainly should be, and it's something when I deliver training I talk about my both different journeys, certainly from the perspective of an impacted other, that, you know, during that period of time with my sister going into different establishments, X, Y and Z, I was offered help at various different points of her journey. If she was in prison, for example, I would be reached out to by somebody from the recovery wing. Would you like to come in and do a family day when she went into rehab? Would you like to, it'd be important if we spoke to you, blah, 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 blah. Didn't get any of that. My gambling journey, I can remember going to my GP and saying, I'm really in a bad way, like really, really unwell. My partner is a gambling addict, and they just said, not really anything we can do for you. If your husband was an alcoholic or a drug addict, I'd know where to send you. But, you know, and I've had stories of women I've supported that have done the same thing and come out with contraception. Well, you don't want to have a baby now while your husband's doing that. Yeah, oh, there's the things I've heard you wouldn't believe. But luckily, I went back to that same GP surgery 6 months ago and delivered training there to 30 GPs around gambling disorder, and they're now asking the question, which is important, because the families do get left behind. And when I came into this space, I can remember giving my first, speaking at a conference in Scotland, actually, I think it was called The Quiet Storm, which I thought was quite apt for me because I'm quite stormy and not quiet. And I was the only impacted other at this conference. And this conference was full of, you know, people from all of the recovery organisations, you know, Gordon Moody, etc., etc. And I was the only impacted other. And I remember standing up and saying, you know, we are an afterthought. You know, you've got all this funding and you're creating all these great programs and projects. And then it's like as if we're an afterthought. And we're not an afterthought. We are an integral part of this journey. Quite often than not, I will hear people say, oh, if it wasn't for my mum or my wife or whatever, I wouldn't be where I am. You've touched on that yourself in your own journey. So who's holding us up? Who's looking after it? Who's coming to us and saying, are you okay? Do you need help? And so, you know, I'm proud of the work that I do, and I'm proud of the work that we do at Gamlearn because we do it well. We, you know, you don't have, the gambler in recovery does not have to be accessing our service for family to receive support from us. If someone contacted me tomorrow and said, my son's committed crime to fund his gambling and I don't know what to do, but her son never engages in our service, we will support that person in the same way that I would support somebody whose partner is engaging in our service. Because that person was me. And I see every person that comes to me as me. What did I need? What did I want? What did it look like? And then it'll be like, okay, where are you at? What do you need help with? What does that help look like? And that can be a whole number of things. It can be, I've got no food. So we need to look at food banks. We need to look at vouchers. It could be that I've had a freezing order and I've got a joint account with my husband and I can't access my wages. I can't pay my bills. I can't feed my kids. Okay, let's get that sorted. Or my husband's in prison and I can't afford to visit because I've got no money. okay, let's get that sorted. Let me get onto the prison. Let me get onto the visitor centre. Let me speak to them. There is pots of money there that you know, it's a whole array of stuff that we, family members, friends, colleagues, whoever the individual is that's supporting you, that we go through. And we are, space is getting better, don't get me wrong, it is getting better, but there's still got a long way to go, in my opinion, when it comes to support for impacted others. Massively.
Guys, you can hear how passionate Tracy is about what she does. If anyone's struggling with any of the stuff she's just mentioned, when we're done here, check the video description out below. There's going to be links and resources down there that I'm going to get off Tracy. It's all going to be listed below. If you need some of that help, please have a look down below. Throughout your story, I feel like you blamed yourself an awful lot. I feel that's work that you're doing now. Give me a yes or no for this first question. Would you agree that for the majority of his gambling addiction, you wanted recovery for him more than he wanted it himself?
100% yes.
I heard something recently in a meeting and it said, if I take away your pain, I take away your power to change. And I love that. You spoke about enabling and stuff like that. Do you feel that moment where your daughters come round, give him that kick up the arse, and then you've done it as well? You've got angry with him and said, if you're not going to do something about it, you can't blame us. If you're not going to do something about it, get out. Do you feel he needed that? He needed that tough love to kickstart it?
100% yes.
You can give me a bigger answer for that one. It's only the first one was yes or no.
Yes.
Oh, that's your answer. That's
yes.
it. That's it.
Because no, absolutely yes. And I've spoken to a number of people, gamblers in recovery, who say to me, you know what, it was when my wife threw me out, as painful as that was, and I was sofa surfing and whatever, it was then that I realised I have got to do something. But my God, had I put her through it to that point. You know, we'd been through everything. And there are times where I think maybe I should have thrown him out. There are times when I should have just gone, enough. And I think because of the person I am and because of the journey with my sister, I probably did long that out longer than I should have. But I've learned from that, certainly. And the people that I support now, we work a lot around boundaries in my group. And when I think, to just give you an idea, I've got husbands, wives, siblings, parents. Yeah, I've got a bit of everything in my group. And so the relationship with their person is different. You know, if it's a child, a young adult, with your children, and you know this, there's that unconditional love. There is that, if your child falls over in the playground, is that you're going to pick them up, you're going to rub their knee, you're going to give them a hug and make it all better.
Nope,
or not.
Nope,
you
nope.
won't be tough love.
Yeah, no, that's my psychotherapist taught me that's not the best thing to
Okay,
do.
right. But a lot of people have that.
As much as I really want to do it, yeah.
Okay. But a lot of people have that approach. And I think when you've got a child that's in addiction, there is also that added layer of something about me has caused this. Did I bring them up differently? Was it because I didn't do that, or I did? And I hear that a lot, really a lot with parents. I was speaking to a lady just the other day, and she was opening up about all stuff about herself, saying, I'm to blame for this. I know because I didn't do this or I didn't. And I'm like, stop, hang on, come on, let's talk about this. But I think with a partner, see, and when I've been in groups, when I used to go to my group and they were all parents, I used to say, I have so much respect and empathy for you because, you know, no matter what's going on in your children's lives, you're putting those boundaries in place. You're doing X, Y, and Z. You're here. You're turning up to these meetings because you're wanting to understand and hopefully be able to help your child. I have the utmost respect for you because you're not in a position to leave as such. Like, okay, you can cut your child out for a bit, but no matter what, you're always going to be their parent. And they would say, well, we've got the utmost respect for you because you can leave and you're choosing to stay. And quite often than not, that can be a challenge for people. And I'm going to say this, that can be a challenge for women with children. Women with children who choose to remain in a relationship with an addict get really stigmatized. They have that added layer of kind of shame of, oh, you know, that, oh, what sort of mum are you? You're choosing to stay in a relationship with somebody that's got an addiction. He's always going to put his addiction first. Oh, it'll only be a matter of time before it happens again. I've heard it all. And there is that. And I think quite often than not, well, no, I don't think, I know, that's a barrier for people reaching out for support. You know, is social services going to get involved? Is my GP going to ring the school? Or if I go to the, you know, there's all of that. And there's not a lot of provision out there currently for children and families around gambling addiction and crime. I went on to a conference a few weeks ago. There was a minister of children and families on there, and I was able to ask him a question around, you know, support for children of a gambling addict whose parent is either in prison or facing prison, you know, within the CJS estate, what's going to be put in place. Do you know what he said to me? He said, I don't know, because I don't know anything about it. And I thought, wow, we've got this whole, you know, these invisible children who are being re-traumatized, and they are, because quite often than not, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, you know, gambling crimes make the headlines. And so quite often than not, children are going to school and, you know, their parent will be in the paper. And, you know, so in regards of impacted others, affected others of gambling related harm, gambling related crime, there's still a long way to go. There's still a long way to go. And I am really passionate about creating that change. I really am. And we're doing some great work at Gamlearn, and we're going to be putting some great projects together, and we are going to create that change. Absolutely, we are. Well, all the time I'm around, we will be anyway.
I can feel that passion. I was thinking it was the box light over here that's making me hot, but I don't think it is. I think it's the passion coming through the screen from you, Tracy.
Yeah.
Right. I want to reference a few things that I related to a lot with my wife. At one point, you said I was just so beaten down by it, and it took me back to a memory of I think it was my last relapse in 2021. It might have been the one in 2019. And I know you said you don't like controlling. My wife controlled my finances from 2017. So I needed a hit for those relapses in 2019 and 2021. I needed to go through her and manipulate her and feed her these lies, saying, like, let me put it in. So it was Bitcoin, basically. I was doing cryptocurrency, but
Okay. Yeah.
I was telling my wife I was putting it in and investing, safe investing, but what I was actually doing was leverage trading. Basically, I was betting whether Bitcoin was going up or down. It was like multiplying my wins by 100, but also my losses by 100.
Yeah.
And I was desperate to get this next one on, just to get it back. I was like, I need to fix this. I need to win to fix this. And I just remember berating her for days and days and days. And in the end, she just threw the phone at me and just said, do what you want. And I just related to you saying I was so beaten down by it. It just took me right back to that moment where she threw the phone at me, and I was shocked. I was like, oh, like, my wife's never been violent towards me, but instantly, like, overwhelmed with that feeling of like, yes, I've got what I wanted. I can do this now. But like, I always try and put this point across. In no way, like you said, it wasn't about you. In no way was it, yes, I can now do this and make this situation worse. In my mind, it was like, this is how I'm going to fix it. I was 200% confident that despite gambling getting me in that mess, despite losing every single time for the 21 years previous, this next time is going to be the one. This is when it all turns around. I get it all back and I can stop. The 3 or 4 times across my life I did get it back, I still didn't stop. But I was so convinced. But you just took me right back to that moment where my wife was clearly just so beaten down by it. She threw the phone at me. And the doubt of money, where you were speaking about, I can't remember its name, I taught a pussycat, the tin.
Oh,
and you were doubting yourself so much about it. I just thought my wife must have had those doubts so much, because even I had those doubts myself, where I'd hide winnings on top of the wardrobe. This was earlier in life when I used to go to casinos and it was cash. And then I wouldn't be aware of how much I'd lost, and all of a sudden there'd be nothing there, and I'd be like, "Did I gamble? Did I put that somewhere else?" And then I remember one time I found £1,000 up there, and I was like, oh, "I thought I gambled all that. Wow, I've got this," and being excited that I can fix it. I can get it all back now. But looking back, I can see the excitement was just, I've got more ammunition to go. But I struggled with that doubt of money, and I was the one doing it, so I can't imagine the doubt that you must have had, and my wife must have had, just because like I'm dozy as hell, but like I was the one doing it. It's just, it feels so much worse that you had that doubt, that my wife inevitably had that doubt, that a lot of people listening to us now would have had that doubt when it's not their fault. And it just, yeah, you give me, and I was in the addiction for 22 years, and you give me a new perspective on it. And I'm sure you've done that for so many people listening. That day in Gamfan, it all just came out, 15 minutes of tears. Is that your first day of recovery?
Okay, I'm going to go back and touch on the other bit that you said about her throwing the phone, because I can remember doing exactly that. Do you know what? Have the money, do what you want. I don't care anymore. I'll give up. Just do what you want. And I don't want this to be uncomfortable for you, I think what I've learned in this space, and it's something I've been talking about a lot recently, and I've always brought it up because that's who I am. I just put it out there. Is that there's a lot of hidden domestic abuses that's under the umbrella of gambling harm. And we as impacted others are very much in a kind of space where we're sort of made to feel we need to minimize that, because lo and behold, we're in love with somebody, they've got an addiction, they're working on it, things are unraveling, we're unraveling, and alongside that, there is quite often, and I can usually see when it's coming down the road, this sudden realization of, oh my goodness, I've been in a really coercive relationship. My husband, wife, son, daughter really manipulated me, really emotionally blackmailed me, all that, and there's a lot that unravels. And I think for the gambler in recovery, for them too to go, wow, I got my wife to a point. I went on and on and on and on and on at her until eventually she broke. And I think that can be really hard for people to work through. And again, I think a lot of this stuff does need to be picked up and worked through, because it is really harmful and really traumatic. So I hope, I know that you've realised that and that you've thought about it. So I hope that after this call, you go and give her a big hug, because she deserves one, and she does. And you both, I know you're working on things together, and that's amazing. But there are little, there can still be healings. I think there can still be healings all along this journey. It doesn't just go bam like that. Do you know what I mean? It's so that I just wanted to say that to you. My first day of recovery, I think my first day of recovery was when I got that phone call from my friend. I think that was my first day of recovery.
The terminal diagnosis.
Yeah. I think going to my first meeting was a game changer. I mean, absolutely it was, because going to those meetings has got me to where I am now, in the sense of helping others, and through helping others. And it's not vicarious trauma or anything like that. It is through helping others. I'm healing myself. Some people might say, oh, that's kind of the whole wounded healer vicarious trauma thing. It's not, because I'm a work in progress. I always will be. I think we are as human beings anyway, no matter what. But yeah, I think doing the work that I do, and continuing to give back in some way, I'm still in recovery. I always will be. Like you, like my
we're
partner.
A work in progress.
We really are. And I don't always get it right. And I do have days where I have those little things like, I see friends moving on, buying a bigger house or whatever. And I think, not going to be me, or, having a nicer car, not going to be me. Sometimes I have those little moments of where I could have been, but I'm here. and I'm present, and I'm working on myself on so many levels every day. And I hope that by doing that, I'm a better mum, I'm a better friend, I'm a better colleague, and I am better equipped to walk alongside others who find themselves, impacted by somebody else's gambling.
I want to touch on the trust bit that you've spoken about, where you said sometimes you've got to give that answer that they don't want to hear. You say the trust might not come back. I know 4.5 years now into my recovery, my wife trusts me a hell of a lot more than she did 4.5 years ago.
Excellent.
I I'm more, every so often I have the thought of, do I still need my finances to be controlled? Do I still need to be treated like a baby? And I just go with the thought of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That one time every 6 months when in the shops it gets declined and I need to go, I just need to call my wife, and I'm embarrassed calling my wife to sort my card out. It's worth just that temptation not being there, to stress off my shoulders, not having an online login password. And I feel just always handing that over, and also not getting annoyed when I get questioned. And my initial reaction inside was like, how dare she? I haven't gambled for 2 years. But then before I'd verbalize it, I'd process it, and I'd be like, the stuff I put her through, she's got every right to question me for the rest of her life, and I need to be okay with that. And I've done work on that, and I'm completely fine. And I am now more offering of the evidence before she even asks, just out of I don't want to say kindness, out of I'm that comfortable. I'm that comfortable with her questioning me that I offer it out before she even has the chance to question me. I feel that's definitely helped with the trust. I don't know if it'll ever fully be back, similar to what you said. I'm happy with the progress over the last 4.5 years. What I did want to touch on is, and you told me, you surprised me at the start, you've done your research on me and you've seen the episode with my mum. My mum spoke about, my mum is the best mum in the world. I love her so much. And she tells me almost every day how proud she is of me. In that conversation I had with her, she did say that every time the phone rings, she says, I used to answer the phone with, Mum, where are you? Whenever it was I need a bailout, I've done this, I'm in trouble. And she told me that in the sit down conversation I had with her. And she said she still fears that that's how I'm going to answer the phone call every time I think. And that sort of hurt, that I know she trusts me, but there's still that there. I've got an amazing relationship with my mum. And since then, I've even thought about doing a call net and go, Mum, where are you? And I was just like, no. I the fact that it's still that raw to it. I can't do it to her. Normally I can have that relationship with my mum and I can have a joke. But that was a shock to me, that she still has that little seed of doubt. And it was so shocking to me that I was like, I'm not even willing to make a joke about it. Which hurts. It does hurt. But it's completely understandable. It's not like, how dare she? I'm not saying I blame her. It hurts that I've hurt my mum that much. I've scarred my mum that much, that's still there. But I like what you said, where you will be honest about it and say the trust might not come back, because it's true for me.
Yeah, and when they say, oh, well, what can I do to gain trust? I say exactly really what you've just said, is transparency. In a way, is time and transparency, and be prepared that even if a year down the line, your wife, whatever, says to you, can I look at your phone? That you go, yeah, no worries, babe, there it is. Because the minute they go, why do you look at my phone? Straight away, we're triggered. And I think also, we talk about our triggers in my group a lot, because we do have them. I think some people don't realise that, but we do have them. And they can often be around sporting events. I know when Cheltenham's coming up that my phone's going to blow up with people going, oh, I'm feeling really anxious. Any tips on, what I should? And I'm like, well, go for a walk, do something, do something as a family. This normally when the person's in early recovery. But, I'll always say, patience, time, transparency. Your person, your wife, your husband, your son, your daughter, whatever, your mum, they're trusting your process. They're trusting their own. You're learning to live differently. They're learning to kind of get their head round, because for the impacted other as well, what often comes out a few months down the line is the money's forgotten about. It's gone. Can't do anything about it. But then it's the lies. that's, you know, the behaviours. Oh, well, if they were lying about that, what else have they lied to me about? So that's a big thing for us. So I always say, as difficult and as challenging as it is, be honest and just be transparent, because with that, you're showing a willingness to be open and vulnerable and to change. And for us, that's received so well. And the reason I don't use the word control, I use the word support. So I'll often say, if somebody's a bit struggles to just hand over all their finances to their wife or whatever, I'll say, okay, try and frame it as that I'm going to support you or support us with the finances, so that, you know, if your wages are paid into this, and then in 6 weeks' time, we can revisit it. We can have a look at it. What's working, what's not working, why is it not working? Because it's brought me back to a story. It was about a year, maybe not as much of a year actually, maybe about 9 months after my partner lapsed, and because he was working, he'd got this agency job, and so his wages were being paid into a little account that I'd opened up for him, and obviously then he lapsed, and I said, right, okay, do you know what, we got to go back to basics, we've got to go back to square one. You know, money's got to be paid into this account, you can't have access to it, I'm going to open you up an account. I'll have the app on my phone. I can transfer money into it. I can see what you're spending. You know, all of that. We were out. This is about 9 months. We were out. We were out at a recovery group. We'd met in person at something, and we'd gone out. We were having something to eat. And I said, you know, well, really, I suppose it's time now that, you know, you have your, and this was in front of other people, you have your, you know, control of your account. And he went, no, I just leave things as they are. I'd rather you leave things as they are, because I'm not constantly thinking about the money. I know it's there. I know that if I need something and I ring you and say, oh, I've seen a pair of trainers or whatever, you're going to transfer me the money. Or if I want to go and have a game of pool with some pals, you're going to transfer me the money. But if it's just sitting there, it's like it's talking to me, and I'm not at that point yet. So I'd rather we keep things as we are. And that, to me, in that moment, was huge. It was huge for me, because I just thought in that moment, I could see the progress, and that allowed me to trust the process a bit more. So, you know, I think it's a good thing for the finances to be handed over. Quite often than not, there could be circumstances with the people that I support that there really isn't very much choice in that. But there are still people that come to me and go, oh, he's really resistant over it. He doesn't, it's not, or she, or, you know, doesn't want, and I'm like, okay, well, that needs to be a discussion, because, you know, there's work to be done here with both of you. And if this is going to be a huge issue, you need to discover why, what's the issue? Because you can't have it both ways. It can't be like, oh, I need you to trust me, and I'm going to GA and I'm going to Gamlearn meetings and I'm doing all this. You need to trust me. Yet there's something else going on over here. Do you know what I mean? So I think what you've just described there is amazing, and it does help. Like I say, I think bits of trust come back over certain things over time, but definitely it is time, it's transparency, definitely, and a bit of understanding of each other, you know, because I think sometimes, and I've seen it a lot, that when people first enter recovery, they just run away with it, and everything else falls behind. Everyone else gets forgotten because it's just recovery. I've got to go to this group and that group and this group and that. Look at me, I'm doing like 90 meetings in 90 days, and oh, look at me, I'm going to GA 3 times a week, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And in the background, the wife's going, well, okay, well, what about me? What about us? What about the kids? What about your mum? What about your dad? What about, like, we need to talk about this? And then I'll get the family saying to me, oh, like, I feel like I need to talk to him about this, but I'm really worried that they're then going to relapse. Oh, that's a big one for me. That's a big one for me. Because I'll be like, listen, alongside recovery, life happens. And if they're really doing the work, there's a difference between abstaining and doing the work. And if they're really doing the work, they will understand and have those tools in their toolbox that life happens alongside your recovery. People are going to die, jobs are going to get lost, kids are going to get sick, whatever. You got to have enough stuff in you to be able to deal with those alongside your recovery, and you have to trust that they're doing that, and that's not always easy for us, but we have to try. And you have to be patient with us.
When you were saying, oh, recovery, look at me, I'm doing meetings. I was waiting for you to go, look at me, I've got a podcast. I was going to go, hey, stop picking at me.
No, but you get what I mean. I think,
Yeah.
especially with some of the people that we support, because as I said to you earlier, their gambling addiction doesn't get revealed in a small way. It's a catastrophic event, and their family, it's like literally, I remember running a group a few years ago, and one of the wives said to me, Tracy, I feel like my husband walked down the garden path and threw a grenade over his shoulder, and I'm still picking pieces of that up. I'm still 6 months a year finding bits of it under the sofa, or, and it's still there, because everything in that moment, everything in our life changed. Everything I thought we were going to have, our future as I thought we were going to have it, was lost. My past is now questionable, because what was truth, what was lies? Who is this person? My present is uncertain, and, just
Can't even see a future.
Yeah. Like, I remember somebody asked me once to sum up what it is to be an affected other, and I thought, oh Jesus, I'll be here a week. And I just came out with lots of different stuff. But something that really stuck to me was that gambling addiction is a stealer of dreams, because it definitely stole some of mine.
I love the word transparency. I say that's the best part of recovery for me. The fact that everything's
100%.
out on the table. I'm not hiding anything.
Yeah,
I'm not trying
absolutely.
to beat it to the mailman. My heart doesn't skip a beat when she picks up my phone. I love that. I say that's the best part. Everything's out on the table.
It sets you free, and it sets us free. And I think, again, this is something that I'm doing some work on at the minute with Gamlearn, is bringing. I think what happens a lot in people's journeys is you've got the person in recovery, and then you've got the family person in their recovery, and there's not a lot of meeting in the middle. Some of those really awkward, pinchy conversations are quite often not have for fear of one upsetting the other. Do you know what I mean? Because you're in a very sort of quite new space, I suppose, in the early days. And I've found that having those joined up conversations can often be quite healing in a supported environment, because then, like you say, you can both be transparent, and you can both say, I need time, or I'm finding that, or whatever. Whereas quite often I find that's not being said. But yeah, transparency sets you free, 100% for both. And I mean, like, for me as well, and as it is for the gambler in recovery, definitely. And you'll grow from that, definitely.
Tracy, I've took up so much of your day, but I've got a couple of quick fire questions that I like to throw in at the end. But I'm not sure if you're capable of quick fire answers. But I'll give it a go.
Oh God,
I'll give it a go and see what happens.
Go on then, I'll try.
Right, you're going to speak to two different people in these two different questions. The first question: what would you say to gamblers about the impact that they don't see?
Take time to listen. Take time to sit down and understand how much we care about you. And because we care about you, that's why it's affected us so much. We care, and we want you to be okay.
Okay. What would you say to someone currently living with a partner who gambles?
Reach out for help. Even if that's one conversation, it could change your life. You're not on your own. There are many people out there like you. Whatever you're going through, it could also be dual addiction. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. Just reach out. If your partner is drinking and gambling, taking drugs and gambling, if you're in a domestic abusive situation, if you're frightened that social services are going to get involved, the school's going to, whatever, none of that's going to happen. What will happen is you will speak to somebody that is going to hear you, understand you, and walk beside you. And you may never need to have another conversation. You may put the phone down, but just know that you're not alone, because you are not alone. It's not your fault. You didn't cause it, and you can't cure it on your own. But there are people out there that will walk beside you. Reach out.
Please Please reach out. Yes, both those affected others and the gamblers, please reach out. I normally ask, do you regret your addiction? Tracy, you weren't the one who's addicted, but sitting here with me today, everything that we've spoken about, everything that you've told me in your story, do you have regrets?
I don't regret anything that I've done. I regret some of the things I didn't do. Everything happens for a reason. I'm quite a spiritual person, and I believe all my life experiences have led me to this point. And as I said to you earlier, I hate doing things like this. It probably doesn't come across like that, because I instantly think, oh, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said that. But I think if this reaches one person, then my journey's been worth it. And I don't want to sound like some sort of martyr or hero, but that's true. That's how I feel. Because if I had found this when 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I probably would have had a different journey. So have I got any regrets? Just some of the things I didn't do. Like I say, just finding help sooner, finding the right help, maybe getting that help for myself sooner. If I'd got help for myself sooner, I think I would have saved myself a whole heap of pain, and him probably as well. Yeah.
If you're still here watching this with us, please leave a like on the video and reach out below. Are you that one person that me and Tracy have tried to help today? If you are, get in the comments down below and let us know. I've heard this quite a few times across my life, and I do believe it. They say you die twice. Once when you actually die, once when the last time your name is spoken. Tell me how you and your family keep the memory of your sister alive today.
She's in all of us. We talk about her every day. She was so funny. I think when people think about drug addicts, they have this kind of, vision, people you see in the street, antisocial, blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, she was all those things at different times in her life. But whenever I think of my sister, and this happened to me for a long time after she died, I couldn't visualize her as an adult. I could only see her as a child when she was young and innocent and happy. And one of the favorite photos, I wish I had it with me actually, it's downstairs in my lounge, is a photo of her really giggling. And that's how I remember her, because she was really, really funny, and she was kind, and she was empathetic, but she was traumatized, and her trauma manifested as an addiction, and she didn't get the right help. And that's really sad, and I miss her every day. But I try to, when I think of her, I try and think of things that make me laugh, make me smile. And she lives on in her daughter. She lives on in her grandchildren that she never got to meet. And she lives on in my children, because she's taught them such vital life lessons. And they're all very empathetic and kind, and all, have a real understanding around all addictions, and know that at any given time, stuff happens and people react to it differently. But she will be forever. I think she'd be proud of me. I think she'd be really, really, really proud of the work that I'm doing. And there's not a time whenever I don't go to a conference and stand up and speak that I don't feel her next to me saying, go on, you tell him. Go on, girl, tell him. Yeah.
I love it. I've only known you for 2.5 hours, and I'm extremely proud of you and you sharing your story today. Thank you so much for being here with me, Tracy, and giving me so much time.
Having me. It's been amazing.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Guys, the video on the screen now, Luis Ruggiero, I say the best part of recovery is everything's out on the table. He's got a podcast called Nothing's Off the Table. I sat down with him and discussed his gambling addiction, how he's got a 20-year repayment plan and how he deals with that. Click the video on the screen and I will see you over there. Tracy, thank you so much.